Hi.
MSHQ here. We are doing a quick workshop with you guys, so welcome, on the secrets to answering every secondary question. And I think between Dr. Crispen and myself, we've read our fair share of secondary prompts. And it is a different writing style than the primary, so I'm excited to chat with you guys about it with Dr. Crispen. Hi.
100% different.
Yeah.
So,
Okay.
yeah, I'm excited to be here.
Okay. So I think what we have on deck for everybody is just kind of going through some of these slides, talking through it, purpose behind it, what they look like, some tips and tricks or things to avoid or things that help you stand out. So we're just going to kind of give you thorough rundown of how to transition your mind into what is known as the tidal waves of secondaries. So I don't know, Christine, do you want to move through the slides? You want me to move through them? I'm fine doing whatever.
I will advance us along.
Okay.
So the application timeline, it has arrived, my friends. So if you are applying and you're doing through AMCAS, next week is the day. It's AMCAS, TMDSAS, and ACOMAS are all open. So we're looking at right here, and everybody is open, but now we're coming to the end of May. You can already submit Texas. You can already submit ACOMAS. Now AMCAS is up, and you can submit them come Tuesday. Yep. So they all take a little bit of time. This month of June, in many cases, is really looking at verification. Some schools may send secondaries. DO schools, Texas schools may start sending secondaries. But the true wave is really going to start hitting as we get into late June, early July. So that's, I kind of start dreading summer at this time of the year. I'm not going to. I don't know about you, Courtney, but just the thought, it's so much.
The volume, the sheer volume for everybody is aggressive. Yeah, for sure.
Because they don't roll out. The few schools who screen, and we can talk about what a screen looks like, may delay it by a couple weeks, but in general, it's like it's a massive flood that just is going to show up in your inbox one day, and then soon after show up in our inbox the next day.
Yep, exactly. Yeah, it's once it starts, I mean, and I think it's kind of like the hurry up and wait part of this cycle. We're not to the wait yet. We're in the hurry up stage, 100%. And it's going to be in full force here. You try so quickly to get your primary done in as soon as you can. You try to power through your secondaries, and then you kind of wait to hear. So we are right in the heat of the hurry up. So we know it's a stressful place to be, but being strategic can really help you guys in this. So we'll try to remove some ambiguity here.
I hope so, yeah. All right, so crunching the numbers. So how many secondaries per school? Yeah, I mean, 3 to 8 I think seems normal.
Yeah.
The one school, I don't know about you, that you get this a lot. I get this school. Everybody who works with me goes through this school is UCSD, where they have you write another 6,000 character essay. And I literally
warn everybody about that.
Yeah. And they all come to me because they, people are convinced I have a magic sauce somewhere. And so I dread that essay. You just don't know how much I dread that essay.
I know. So just so you guys know, if you're in California, you're wanting to apply California, or even if you're coming from out of state, I do bring up as well, specifically UCSD's 6,000 character autobiography of yourself. Yeah.
That is not a repeat of your personal statement.
Right. And it's just one of their prompts. I think another heavy hitter is Duke. They've got a pretty robust number of prompts on their secondary. So Yeah, you guys just have to have a heads up of what's coming. Pre-writing is going to become essential, and you'll figure out why as we kind of go through these. I usually tell people, like if you're applying to 20 schools or more, just buckle up for about 100, 120 additional essays of varying length, based on having 3-day prompts per cycle or per school. Yeah.
Yep. And the lengths of the prompt vary from 250 characters, 250 words to, as we just discussed, 6,000 characters, or my personal favorite, unlimited. Yeah. So it's a lot. And deadlines, do you want to talk about the 2-week deadline, Courtney?
Yeah. So ideally, you're pre-writing, and we can get a little bit more into that. But once secondaries start going out, it is best case scenario if you can turn them around professionally written in about a 2-week time period. The reason being is schools need this secondary to be turned in before they're going to start considering you for an interview. So it's really imperative to get this in, to be able to go into a queue for review and get considered early on for an interview, or at least kind of go into their system of consideration, whether it's a hold or not. So the sooner you get this in, the more likely the chances are of you ending up with an interview at an earlier date, because all of the interview slots haven't been filled up because of everybody else who's been invited for an interview, which it can quickly snowball, I would say. As soon as the cycle opens, it doesn't take long for interview invites to start going out. It really doesn't. We're trying to move through the cycle as directors, and with us both having been directors, I think we can both attest to, we want to seat the class and hold as quickly as we can. And so if you keep yourself to about a 2-week turnaround time after you get them, it will kind of keep you from ending up in a situation when you're turning these in November. Most of the interview slots have been taken. A ton of interview dates are now already over. Maybe a good chunk of the class is already filled up. So you gotta pre-write so that you will be ready for this 2-week turnaround.
100%. And honestly, I don't know that I've ever worked with a student who's been 100% on top of that 2-week deadline. I mean, there's a reality check to that. Yeah. But you also want to pay very close attention to the schools. Like, again, California school, UCLA actually has a deadline. They expect it to be returned in 2 weeks. There's no suggestion toward that. So if you're applying to UCLA, in-state, out-of-state, it does not matter. You need to prioritize a return in 2 weeks. So you also want to check out deadlines to see if there's an actual deadline or we'd like to see it back in approximately 2 weeks. There's a little flexibility there. Not a lot, but a little bit more than, nope, it's in or it's not situation.
Yeah. And I think another thing to consider, right, is Texas. The verification process kind of happens on the back end, not on the front end, like DO and MD platforms. And so you can probably anticipate, if you're applying in Texas, you're going to get secondaries pretty rapidly after you click to go in, because they're verifying if you're a resident. Basically all they're doing on the front end. And so unless a school has a significant pre-screen at the beginning, you can anticipate you should probably prioritize some of those Texas secondaries, because they're going to come out really quickly for you. So,
and DO only has a 2-week verification on the end, right? So, I mean, you can submit early to them. And so you also need to prioritize those, because they're going to have a quicker turnaround, right? They're going to come out earlier. So you want to be strategic in putting your list together like that.
Yep. Yeah.
All right. So some common themes. Why this school? I feel like this question is so simple and it's so difficult, because I don't know about you, but I've seen all the answers to this question and I've seen why they're a good fit, why you're a good fit, why he's, I mean, this answer is so convoluted sometimes.
Yeah. Yeah.
But they do want to know why you want to come there. And I think that's, again, having sat on a committee, having sat as the director of admission, both Courtney and I, you also want people who want to come there.
Yes.
And I fully own the fact that I could be a second or a third choice because, everybody has a dream school and that's fine. But do something to really make it known that you want to come to me. And if you truly don't see yourself wanting to go to that school, you probably shouldn't have applied there in the first place.
Yep.
So
there's a decent amount of ego in this question. And I think a lot of people, here's something I end up talking to a lot of my students with that I work with, like, let's move beyond just looking at the admissions marketing page to be like the hub of where you're pulling everything out. If you're talking to me, I appreciate that there's a simulation lab that will help me prepare for third and fourth year. Like, yes, every school in the nation has that. So what are we talking about? Or I like the match rates, which will help me, when I'm going for something selective. So please, please, please do your own due diligence. Tie yourself to the school. If you need to look at their social media pages to see what they are consistently advertising that they're really proud of about themselves, if you need to look under the leadership tab, see their vision, look at institutional reports about where they're pumping money, what their students are involved in, that they've really amassed hours in, clubs, labs that they have that maybe you want to work in. Like, put something together that's actually strong and not just what they are going to give you and what you'll have access to, but where you're going to add value as well, or there's some alignment and goals and things like that. So this question actually takes quite a bit of time if you're doing it properly, and you don't have to say 17 things, but you should have a couple of very clear, kind of grounded points as to why you would want to go there and where they're going to find you, if they're looking at you second year. So do some research beyond just the admissions page, because that is played out and it's the laziest way to write it.
Yeah. I generally hope that students, and I try to advise my students, start the answer with, and you don't have to write it exactly like this, but in some form or fashion, you're going to help me become the doctor I hope to become through whatever that looks like. But you have a goal of the kind of doctor you hope to become, and we just wrote 5,300 characters on that doctor. So you should have an idea of who you want to be. You should have an idea of who you want to work with and how you want to be that doctor. And how is this school going to help you achieve your goals? That's what they want to know, right? Is, have you done all this diligence that Courtney just mentioned to achieve your goal of becoming that doctor? So I literally will say, please just say, this is what my goal is, and then tell me how they're going to help you get that. You're going to help me become this doctor.
Yeah.
So
take your time on this one. Do it right. Because like you said, we can cherry pick who we're bringing in. If you don't want to be here, and it's very clear that you don't want to be here, okay, we'll move on. We've got 5,999 other candidates to review. So, and these are secondaries are the only school specific prompts. They created these questions. There's a value to them, to each independent school. And so if you're not even willing to take time to explain to them why they're a good fit, this is not a good start to a secondary. And basically every school asks this question, sometimes in multiple ways.
Yes. And also, please read the question. I know we're going to get to the tips and tricks, but I'm just going to start this because this question is asked in a variety of ways. So don't assume that just because you do a common theme, like we were going to talk about these themes and you kind of form, I'm going to write the diversity question, I'm going to write the YS question. please, before you attach your answer to the question, you read the question thoroughly to make sure that question or that answer that you attach does actually answer the question.
Yep.
So, okay. I feel like students, I don't know about you, but I feel like a lot of my students have struggled with this second one. Obstacles, challenges, and problems. I hear a lot about it. What do I say? What do I say? They do want you to be able to be reflective. I feel like they also want to know, are you resilient? Can you move past and overcome and get through? UC Irvine asks you an achievement and asks you about a challenge. So they want to know. And I have to sit and talk with students. I mean, it's hard to can you tell me what your challenge is? Because I don't know if I can give you that answer. I can talk a little bit about why you want to be a doctor at this point, but I can't talk about your personal challenges.
Yeah. I think a lot of people, well, one, if it asks you for a full-on fail, boy, there's a struggle with that one. That's actually a fairly common question. Yep, not that you need to go and manifest a failure, but it's like making a little error is not a failure. Okay. And so take your time. You're about to go into something that's very rigorous. That's going to require a lot of emotional maturity and resilience. Yep. And so if you've never even faced a challenge or have had something not go your way or fail at getting elected to that role that you wanted or something like that, you're a bit untested. So there is a certain level of risk associated with that of okay, well, we're guinea pigging this as soon as you get into school. Hopefully you have developed enough to be able to handle that on your own with the resources that we've got available to you. So as long as you're talking about it, you're being thoughtful with how you're disclosing it, but you're leaning into, sometimes growth happens through failure, and talking about the growth, we're good.
Yep.
A pet peeve of mine with this question is, and I'll just tell you guys right now, when you save the last 400 characters of tell me about a time you failed. So you go through, you tell me about the time, you tell me about the growth that happens, and then the last 400 characters looks like, and that's why I appreciate this medical school who will provide, resources and student affairs that will help me, blah, blah, blah. You don't need to stick a sales pitch at the end of this. That's not at all what I'm asking you. So answer the prompt. Not everything needs a sales pitch or tied to the school at the end of it. That would be very inappropriate to use those characters for that. Okay.
Agreed. Also, an empath is definitely a failure.
Yes.
In organic chemistry, it's not necessarily a failure. And you also want to pay attention, is it a personal failure? Is it a professional failure? So you want to navigate through that question. So keep that in mind as well.
Yep.
Okay. The future and specific specialties. So they want to kind of know, have you thought about it? I get a lot of, have you thought about the kind of setting? That's what I've seen lately. Setting that you want to work in. I guess I'll start with, you don't actually have to know what specialty you want to be in. It is perfectly okay to be open to, actually, I prefer you actually be open to exploring the stuff that med school has to offer. So if you're sitting in this audience and you're freaking out because, oh my God, I don't know what kind of specialty I want, you are perfectly fine. You can talk about that, and you can talk about maybe your thought process and what your goals are and how you envision yourself being a doctor. You can still think about working in an urban population or considering maybe, well, I like a lot of things, but primary care has been pretty prevalent, or I like the surgical specialties, but I really don't know. It's okay to think a little bit and be open to those experiences.
Yep. Totally agree.
So, the diversity question. They want to know what you bring to the class. They do.
Yep.
I actually had someone the other day write a really nice answer to this question. If I thought about it, I should have asked her if I could have it as an example. I may reach out because I feel
I love those.
She listed qualities of who she was. She talked about, I think it was like collaboration and lead. I mean, she talked about like 2 or 3 different qualities that I thought were really good. She related how she would bring them to the class, and she related how she gained those experiences.
Yeah.
It was beautiful. I was like, this was the first draft. I was like, I don't have anything to say.
Yeah.
Because this was so good. So,
And I think students get hung up on this one.
I do too.
Diversity is broad, right? It doesn't, you don't have to base it off of race and ethnicity, about some type of orientation or anything like that. It's just uniquely you.
Mm-hmm.
What can you bring?
Yeah.
And everybody is unique unto themselves. So even if I get a lot of people, well, yeah, but that's not very unique, or that's not this. I'm like, well, good luck to you being the only one to ever have had something. That's going to be very hard to come up with. And it's okay if some of the other people have some of those components. No one's had the same lived experience. And if this is something you feel like are your strengths, or past experience that's given you helpful exposure, or just an openness to taking and learning from others, right? This word is broader than you think.
It's not your identity only in any capacity. Yeah.
Yep.
So, I mean, I guess if I would give you that piece of advice is, as Courtney said, think broadly. Think of what you bring. You go to a job interview and they say, what makes you a good fit for this role? You're not going to say, well, I am a person of this identity or that. You're going to talk about qualities that you have or that you think you have. And, you know, they just want to know how you're going to fit into the class. Are you, now, if you have certain lived experiences that are certainly related to your background or your identity, don't leave them off the table either. I mean, you are who you are. So just let them get to know you. I can say I grew up in a very rural area when I was very young, and I came to a more urban population. I went from a very insular, homogenetic kind of a place, and I came to Southern California where there's nothing like that. So you do have lived experiences, but you also can talk about being a leader, being a collaborator, you know, engaging, being open to learning new things or whatever. I mean, there's so many things you can bring that you don't have to focus on one particular thing. Also, don't list 14 items and think you're going to wow them with how great you are. 2 or 3 should be sufficient, depending on character count.
Right.
Breaks in education or gap year. So the gap year question. I feel like this is the one question that's fairly common.
Very common.
And easy to kind of pre-write, stick, and that's probably the easiest cut and paste question. What are you doing?
You don't have to get crazy with this one.
Nope.
Just answer the question.
You don't even have to defend a gap year. Just tell them what you're doing.
Right. Don't make this into something that they are not asking you. Yeah. Usually it's just, what are you going to be doing? That's it.
Yeah. And they're usually, some are very specific. They'll say, if you have graduated or you know, are taking a gap year, what are you going to be doing? If you have not graduated, either ignore it or answer some version of that question. So it's really not that serious. Don't overthink it.
Yep.
Healthcare. So that's a big one, because I ask those questions in interviews too. They want to kind of understand that you know what the system is like. So I know Boston, one of theirs talks a lot about their population, and they talk about being a safety net hospital for a large underserved urban population. That's one of their first questions. Yeah. And they want to kind of know how you fit into them, how you fit into that system. And so this is where you start thinking about aspects of healthcare. And it's important no one is asking you to tell me all the tenets of the Affordable Care Act, point, chapter, and verse, but you should understand what it is and what it means.
Yeah. So, and again, here's where research, doing your own due diligence here, like look at the populations they're working with. What is the makeup? Like, where are their affiliated hospitals? What are their needs? What are they accessing? you could learn a lot by doing a little bit of research to really help you answer these types of questions. It just takes effort. But yeah, you do need to have some level of awareness either into social determinants, regional preference, populations, laws and stuff like that. But it wouldn't be just about knowing the law, right? It's probably going to go a little bit deeper than that if it was some question asked. I'm not sure if a lot of them will ask about laws or anything like that, but working with people who access certain benefits or resources or things like that, you should have a level of awareness. Yeah.
Yep. And many of you, if you have done the things you should be doing, you've worked in clinics, you've worked in hospitals, you've worked either in a free clinic or a private clinic, and you should be exposed to many of these things just by virtue of the work that you have done. If you've worked in a free clinic, you understand that there are significant numbers of people who are uninsured or underinsured. If you've worked in a private clinic, you understand some of the limitations of insurance because you have to do prior authorizations or certain treatment plans can't be followed through with. So you should be able to, with reasonable research, be comfortably able to answer these questions.
Yep.
All right. The best part, mistakes. I
feel like this answers it all. This sums it up right here. These three things can drastically change outcomes.
Courtney, have you seen a secondary where somebody has literally copied and pasted it and they forgot to change the school name?
Yes. More than once, unfortunately. Let's not do that.
That's bullet number 3, by the way.
Yeah. Oh my goodness. But after you've read 25, 30,000 med school applications, which is not a crazy number, by the way, guys, if we do this over the course of our careers, this is a completely realistic number. You can spot a canned response that was written for somebody else who had something close, but not really what I'm asking. And you're not fully answering the question I'm asking. So it becomes really easy to spot that kind of stuff. Yeah. Don't answer the question you wish that they asked you and you really have a strong answer for, but it's not really what they're asking, or that somebody else asked you that's close. Like, answer the prompt. Make an effort.
Yeah.
This matters.
I also want to point out that we have been preaching the last several weeks in terms of getting your personal statement done, your activities done. We talk a lot about including a story, show, not tell, show, not tell. Not all secondary prompts need a story. And in fact, if you shoehorn a story into an answer and just kind of assume I'm going to extrapolate something, I'm probably just going to be moving on. Sometimes you just got to answer the question with an actual answer and not try to, this is where I feel like sometimes students get in this idea that they want to use the secondary as an extension of their activities or an extension of their personal statement and make sure you tell all the things that you didn't have to do. And it is not that. They have specific questions that they're looking for an actual answer to. So please, please, please don't do that.
Yep, it's much more direct in this, and I don't need scene setting, right? We don't need scene setting in the secondaries anywhere. So it's a pivot.
So it is. It's a complete mind shift on how to approach it. Read the question, think about what they're asking, and answer it. Now, sometimes a story is appropriate. Tell me about a time when you worked here, when you experienced this. By all means, tell me a story. Yeah. But if I say, tell me what you're doing during your gap year, I don't need the whole discourse and story of why you think you're going to learn something from working in that particular clinic. Just tell me what you're doing. So there's a lot of things to pay attention to. Not pre-writing. That's a big one. I don't think people realize how important it is to pre-write. You will not make anywhere near a month turnaround timeline, I don't think, if you don't pre-write. Because I think, as we mentioned at the beginning, it's a flood, and I don't think we're exaggerating it at all. It's a lot. You're applying to on the low end, you're probably applying to 20 schools. I usually tell students 25 to 35, and I have some overly ambitious ones who like to go with 40 or more.
Oof. Oof.
And I'm like, oh, I cringe. I start cringing when I see those numbers. But 25 to 35 is usually my comfortable number.
Yeah.
And 3 to 8, 10 prompts per school. It adds up quickly. So take some time. Yeah, take the time to pre-write.
Yeah.
And then finally, of course, forgetting to proofread. No, you go.
No, I was going to say it's if you're evaluating and you see a very polished primary application, everything was perfectly written, and then you go to a sloppy secondary, which one do I think is actually your ability to write? The secondary, because you flung that back to me. And so this is actually, and I would veer, if me as an evaluator, I would think that that is actually your writing aptitude. So they need to be just as polished, just as thoughtfully answered, and just put eyes on it. Like double check that you understand the word and character count. They are interchangeable and mixed in and out. So double check, but just, little things like this, or word choice or grammar, really matter when all I have to go off of are numbers and the words that you tell me about yourself. So something as silly as this, if it looks really sloppy, and this is what I put together to ask you, it's a low effort. You basically wasted that secondary fee, because why would I move forward with that one? So, yeah.
And is it your writing ability, or worse yet, and I do think this is worse, do you just not care about my school? Okay.
Right. Mm-hmm.
That's okay too. You turned it around so quickly to get it off your plate, and you just, whatever. So if you don't give that message, because we are just going to be like, cool, we've moved on. Because again, there's a few more coming in behind you, hot and heavy.
Yep.
I was going to say something else. Oh, in your rush to have a good turnaround time, and I appreciate the need to have a good turnaround time, don't discount what Courtney said about taking a moment to put together a polished application. I get and I appreciate that you need to be timely in this, but not at the expense, with the exception of like UCLA, prioritize writing some of these first, pay attention to those things. So you don't have to do it in a way that's hastily done and sloppily done, right? Take your time to do that.
Yep. I mean, just following those 3 things alone could drastically impact your cycle.
Yeah, I agree. Create a spreadsheet. Put some links in there of things. Track the arrival date of your secondary. Track the day that you sent it back. If after 2 weeks, like UC Davis, there's last year, I think USC, Stanford are very slow. They are so slow getting secondaries out. UC Davis screens. Most of the UC schools screen. So if you've gone, like if you're tracking and you know when you received the majority and you know that you have some left, you also might, 2-3 weeks into July, early August, you can reach out and say, hey, I don't believe I would have been screened out because my academics are solid. Did I miss something? You can also then use that as to know where you stand a little bit. You can reach out and say, I don't think I received a secondaries or something happening. So pay attention to that, because you don't want to let it fall through the cracks. You've spent thousands of dollars to get here. Let's not screw this part up.
Yeah. And periodically check the spam box. Probably not every day, but sometimes in your browser, it'll have a setting where if the email message went to over 50 people, they just automatically put it in spam. And I can tell you that I would do that. Sometimes I would batch send out emails or invites or communication. So just periodically check. I know somebody last year who had an interview invite end up there, and he didn't realize it in time. And so it's something to keep on top of.
Yeah, for sure. All right. common diversity prompts. So again, we've talked about this, and they all have some like lot of information that they give you. Some will include their mission statement, but describe your identity. So it's one of two, so you get to choose. And again, try to always, if you don't have an answer or it's an optional thing and you choose not to answer, make sure you put an NA or do something so they know you didn't miss it, that you are not answering it. But be very clear about what you're doing. So you have one of two prompts here. Describe your identity and how it has impacted the development of your values and attitudes toward individuals different from yourself, and how this will impact your interactions with future colleagues and patients. And then, or if you recognize and or represent a voice that is missing, underrepresented, or undervalued in medicine, please describe the missing voices and how increased representation in medicine could impact the medical community. So in other words, how have you interacted with someone different than you, or how do you feel that you're underrepresented, underprivileged, or undervalued, or missing in medicine? Choose one to answer. I don't know what the character count is on here or the word count. Pay attention to that. Take a moment. If you don't know how to answer it, think of an outline. And, piece it together. Mm-hmm. There's no perfect answer. It's just an honest and authentic answer. I think you can't put enough value on that.
Yeah. And I think, maybe not with this one, but there's going to be times where you feel like, boy, I just got a couple in a row that do not show my strengths. That was a sucky line of questions for me personally. I don't sound super strong. You still have to put in effort to answer them, but just, maybe with the way that they framed and phrased it, it's not going to shine your truest colors, right? You can't have your strongest answer because they didn't phrase it that way. But again, you need to write it to the format, honestly, write it to the format in which it's being asked, even if you wish it would have been just slightly different. Okay. Not everything is going to be 100% your best light.
No.
Sometimes it's a luck of the draw, right? Or just questions that they want to ask. And some of these are kind of funky, to be perfectly honest. Some of these secondaries are kind of weird.
100% agree. Wade talks about training physicians from diverse who can connect with diverse populations and who may not share a similar background. Then they ask you for an experience, Q story, that enhanced your ability to understand those unlike yourself and what you learned from it. So the other thing to remember is if they ask you multiple parts of a question, you should answer multiple parts of a question. I don't know if you've seen that where they answer a portion and they use all of the words for that one part of the answer. And I'm like, but you didn't answer the question. Yep. So you have the story. You have the opportunity to tell a story. That's, tell us an experience. Please, please, please leave room to say what you learned from that experience. Don't leave that out. And please don't give me one sentence either.
Yep. There's a couple Florida schools that have multi-tier that I'm usually having to, nope. You only caught that one part. We got to go back now and address the other one.
I literally, when I read it, I scroll up and down about 10 times because I scroll down. I'm like, okay, what's the prompt again? Nope, not yet. Nope. And I'm starting to look for the prompts and make sure I can check off every prompt that you answer. So you should also be doing that, right? Making sure that you understand every aspect of the question and you answer every aspect of the question.
And sometimes they bury it. To be perfectly honest, you'll see a line of text like this big. And part of this is, are you paying attention? Can you critically think? Are you tracking? Like that is an element to secondaries for a lot of schools. And so you really have to be careful.
Yeah. All right. I can't see the pictures there. I'm just going to move to the next slide. All right. A failure. We talked a little bit about this when we talked about the common things.
Yep.
So Georgia, they say the art of medicine requires resilience on the part of its practitioners. The art of being a med student does too, I would argue. There can be perceived failure even when the medical team has done everything right. Please describe a time when you were part of something that failed. What did you learn from that experience? So I ask in an interview a lot of times, tell me about a time that you failed as well. right? So, and this is not the time you failed a test, by the way. I know it's hard, and many of you haven't ever really failed a test, and failure is not something that is common for you. So you really do have to think about this.
Yep. Doesn't have to be academic, doesn't have to be medically related.
I would actually prefer neither of them be academically related or medically related, to be perfectly frank. But think about research. I mean, you fail in research all the time, and maybe you are learning a new task. Maybe you had a job. Maybe you are an athlete and your team failed to win something. You know, there's lots of things that potentially could be drawn from this. You just have to think.
Yeah. I've also suggested sometimes think about the relationships in your life. Has there been times where you kind of failed at being a good friend to somebody, or you know, there's even things like that you can pull from. Yeah. Remember, like in all of these things that we're coaching you on, including in interviews, you don't always have to have like the biggest, grandest display of the thing. And, you know, it's just talk through real life experiences, answer the prompt.
Yeah. And a lot of times I'll get a story and I'm like, I feel like you're saying this is what I attribute, whether it's a regret or a mistake, you know, so I try to also guide them through what I read from that story to make sure it's targeting the right part of the question. So again, some schools, a personal failure. So they don't want to know about school, probably. They don't want to know about the professional aspect, which would be research or a job. They want to know you personally. So going back to Courtney, when you talked about a relationship or a friendship where you weren't a very good friend, or a friendship disintegrated that maybe you wished now looking back that it wouldn't have, or whatever.
Yeah. I've read some good ones for this. I'm not sure if they have like this exact prompt still, but there was somebody who wrote to like really being hard on themselves, not giving themselves time to recover, not listening to the physical therapist, not doing all of this stuff because they had in their mind they needed to get back to the season, and they ended up doing more damage. They really made some choices to
That's good.
Yeah. So again, there's options for you guys. Just spend some time thinking.
All right.
Oh, yeah. Okay. This might be the end. Is this the end? To kind of go through
I think in terms of content, it's the end. Then we'll ask some questions.
Okay.
So I guess now's a good time. We'll talk about some of these other things, but if you have questions, start throwing them in chat so we can work through and answer them. So do that now. But if you need help with secondaries, and I cannot stress enough, I think I'd rather read secondaries than personal statements sometimes, because I feel like there's more mistakes here. We do offer just character count and essay reviews where you can submit the essay online, and it'll take us a few days. We'll read it and give you feedback and get it back to you so you can see it in terms of character count. I would say secondaries are probably comfortably in the 20,000 character range because, again, CSD is 6,000 alone. So something to do, and all of the advisors, Courtney, myself, and all of our friends, we all do the editing and reviewing and things like that. So you might look into something.
What's nice is we've all sat on adcoms and been the decision maker. So we know what makes them bristle, what they like, you know, what makes a strong essay for the school, what they really value. So I feel, I mean, obviously we've put in our work with it and our exposure there. So, and you can do, if you don't want to do written feedback, you can also do live sessions, 30-minute, 50 minutes, if you want to get kind of coached through them live so that you can have discussion or ask questions and things like that. Like I know I like to do live review so I can talk through and ask questions and things like that. So you have both options, whether it's written or doing individual sessions, you can do that.
Yep, I agree. I like that too, because I do feel like I'm going to jump a slide ahead and then I'll come back. I think that's this one, meeting with us one-on-one.
Oh, yeah.
I do like to talk through because I think it does allow me to ask specific questions. And what do you mean by this? And did you think about it this way? And you can really guide them through that conversation.
Yeah.
Also, we have a partnership with Cap Year Academy. And if you're looking to have opportunities to become like a medical assistant over the summer, this is an online and a paced course that would allow you to do that. And if you use this QR code, you can get $200 off of the training. So can't hurt. If that's something you're looking to do and you need some opportunity to train, you might check into that. All right. I'm going to stop there for now, and I'm going to look at some questions. So Roger asks, this isn't a secondary, but I wanted some advice. I wanted to know if I should categorize my clinical research scholars internship as clinical employment or research. It was half research, half clinical by my activities in my personal statement. I mainly talked about clinical while making mention of some research things. I think it really depends on how you write the activity, just to give you that information. Clinical research, if you talk about it in your activities as research, you probably categorize it as research. Clinical research, I still generally categorize it as research, even if they write about it with some clinical aspects.
Yep. Most of the time you're doing data entry or surveys or making phone calls and stuff like that. So it depends on your task.
Yep. In our secondary essays, should we avoid discussing a different anecdote from the same experience as the one that we discussed in our personal statement? So, go ahead, Courtney.
Yeah, if you've put it in your primary, can you not touch it again? No, you can still use it. But keep in mind, they don't want verbatim. Right. And if you just keep telling me the same thing, like you put it in your most meaningful, you put it in your personal statement, and now we find it in the secondaries, you're adding no new value. Right. It seems like your experience is so narrow and you only want to show me this little part of it that it's really gonna take away some of that breadth and depth. Obviously, if it's the best answer for it, okay, but don't put it there verbatim. Add some depth and added perspective to that. But technically you could.
And again, in theory, if it's in your personal statement, I sincerely hope the focus of the anecdote is why you want to be a physician.
Yeah.
In the secondary, it may be a diversity. Tell me about a time you had experiences with people who are different than you. And you feel that for whatever reason, that particular anecdote is the best answer for that. So the lens by which you talk about it should be different, even if it's generally the same story.
Yep.
But also, please just use caution about using anecdotes. Make sure it calls for it. That's what I was going to say initially.
Yeah.
How would I address a question that asks me to explain how my view of diversity is both the same and different as the mainstream view? I don't know if I've ever seen a question like that.
See, this is where it's kind of hard unless you talk through like what your lived experience is and how we can kind of help you network through that or string ideas together. It's kind of hard. This isn't something we can necessarily feed you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I guess you think about the mainstream view. I don't know that the question would be phrased this way. I think a lot of times it's going to be something to the effect of, how have you been impacted by diversity? What have you learned from it? How have you worked with people who are different than you or the same as you? So I think it's really going to depend on the question. And that would be a conversation to be had, probably best in a live conversation. So you can talk and we can ask questions.
And then, if they allow you to be a little bit more granular, so we're not talking diversity like as a whole, if they're saying, what is a part of, this that's different than this, like maybe you break it down a little bit smaller so that you can like talk through and give an example that's a little bit more concrete and show kind of your thinking on there and where it differs. Because this topic, as it's written now, is very big. Like this is almost unanswerable, especially if you only have like 500 characters. No way, right? So some of it will have to do with the character or word count you're given as well, to kind of tip you off into like how much depth they're seeking and how much room you have to give a broad answer or not.
Yeah. Can you please explain other impactful experiences versus a challenge essay? That's a good question.
Yeah.
There may be some similarities to the two.
Yep.
I would assume the challenge essay would maybe be a little more depth. A lot of times the other impactful experiences, unless it's just a singular event in your life, it's a lot of things that have come together over your lived experience. It's not necessarily one specific challenge. It's a number of things. So the breadth of what you say may be a little bit different. I think with the challenge essay, you would go into more depth, as opposed to telling me all the things. You would really focus it more. But I think it's okay that there's probably things that you touch on in the impactful experiences that could be reflected in the challenge essay too. Can you talk about essays that ask about mistakes or other negative things about yourself? For example, the OHSU prompt, one example of a time your failure to use emotional intelligence, your emotional intelligence compounded a difficult situation. So when you didn't use emotional intelligence and it compounded a problem, is it best to talk about something more personal, as I guess opposed to academic or professional, or should it be small and sort of insignificant, seen as avoiding the question? Yeah, I don't think you should avoid the question. I do think they want you to be reflective and they want you to show some resilience, but it also doesn't have to be something so crazily personal that you don't, you've got to find that middle ground, in my opinion.
Yeah. I'm not sure if it's like, the size or the grandeur of the thing. It's how you write about it, what you disclose, how you frame it. If you are looking introspectively, like, are you self-aware? Did you notice it, right? And maybe it doesn't ask for that. Maybe it's just like, tell me about what it is. I just want to know what it is. But if you've never encountered anything like this, it's not something, good for you. But like, if we're looking for resilient individuals that have learned over time and through experience to become emotionally mature, self-aware adults, sometimes you learn that through being challenged, having a failure, right? Not doing the right thing and having, to suffer the consequences. That's not a bad thing. It's only a bad thing if you don't learn from it or you don't see it for what it is. And so it's just like, if you try to act like nothing bad has ever happened to me,
it's not going to work.
It's not necessary. Yeah, it's not necessarily like the best answer. And don't try to spin it like, my greatest weakness is I care too much. Like, don't do that. I worked too hard on this thing and I failed to realize how much effort I was putting in was taking away from something else. Like, please don't. So, you can talk about personal, academic, professional, pick, but be thoughtful in the phrasing.
Yeah, you could think about, not everybody has had dramatic life issues, and that's great. But I would imagine many of you have had a interpersonal conflict with a friend, a sibling, a parent, a relative, where your emotional intelligence or lack thereof made that situation significantly worse. And you can say, during an argument that I had with my sibling, I said some things that really made our argument become more than it needed to be. And unfortunately, that resulted in us not talking for over a month. And I had to step back and realize what was more important. You don't even have to give all the details of what the conflict was. It's more important that you recognize there was a problem and that you maybe hopefully took some steps to resolve that problem. So there's a lot of ways you can play with that.
Yeah. And I think not even everything has to have like the happiest ending. Mm-mm. Sometimes you fail and it's not like, but they forgave me really quickly and we were able to get on with our lives. Like sometimes, no, that does not happen. And it's okay to write that and say, you know what? I wish I would have done that differently. Right. Had to take an L on that one and, just move on with my life, understanding I wasn't going to get that thing.
Or do better in the future.
Or do better in the future, or never have an argument again, right? We just absolutely understood each other after that. Like that doesn't always happen. That's not realistic. And if I'm going to put you bedside next to people who are, in different stages of emotions, put you with preceptors, put you with peers and things like that, if you've never navigated complex conversation or failure or anything like that, it's right. We're introducing a risk because you've never encountered that apparently. So
right. Yeah. Can you please address tell me something about yourself that wasn't included in the primary application or something we should know about you essay?
I feel like that's straightforward.
You haven't told us. In your application, you are probably a pre-med student, top to bottom, sideways, left and right, right? There's not a whole lot about, Lauren, you wrote the question, so there's not a lot about you in there. And so many times, we like to get to know you as a human being, not just a pre-med student. And I think pre-med students forget that you are a person sometimes.
Yep.
So you have hobbies, you moved. I mean, that's literally the first question I ask in an interview too. Tell me about yourself. I actually truly want to get to know you. And so what's one fun thing you would share about yourself that kind of makes you Lauren? I don't care if it's unique. Don't freak out over the word unique. Don't freak out over cliche unless you're telling me you want to help people. Just tell me something about you.
Yep.
Is there a wrong answer to a prompt that is choose one aspect of yourself that is not reflected in your application that you are most proud of and explain your choice?
If it's in your application, you just tell me again. That's a wrong answer.
Right.
That doesn't count. You already told me that.
What are something you're proud of? I mean, again, I know you probably put a lot of things in the awards and honors section. So if you're going to talk about the scholarship you won, that's probably not the one you're going to talk about. You have to kind of think about it. While this is probably in my application, I would probably still talk about being the first person to graduate college in my family. When I crossed the stage, I heard my dad cheering. That to me is very significant. But it's not going to be that I graduated. It's the fact that I was the first one to do it. And I would approach it from that place. It's a lot about the reflection, and explain your choice. Don't tell me that you won a scholarship or that you won these awards for your research or whatever. It's something that's probably more personal to you.
Yeah, that's why they put that's not in your application. We already learned a lot about you as a pre-med student, and they're trying to curb you from going right back into stuff that you've already told us. So humanize yourself a little bit, give it some personality, some more breadth and depth and global perspective of you as a person.
Okay, for diversity secondaries, how do you suggest answer them differently versus the TMD SAS personal characteristics essay? There's probably a lot of crossover. It feels like they are both asking the same thing.
Yep.
The personal characteristics, I think that's the one where they ask how you're enriching the educational environment, or is that that's that one.
Experience of others,
yeah. And so if a Texas school asks for a diversity essay by pulling from a different experience, well, potentially, I think, again, it really 100% is going to depend on the question. Theoretically, Texas schools know what's on the personal characteristics essay, so I hope that they would make enough adjustment where they focus maybe on your experiences working with people who are different than you, and you would talk about it from that lens rather than talking about what you contribute and bring to the environment and to the experience of others. So you really don't want to make an assumption that they are the same and you can pull, because I like to believe that they're going to, just like UCSD, we want an autobiography that is not your personal statement. And so I would presume that Texas diversity question is going to be phrased a little bit different than the characteristics essay.
Yep.
Are there any particular answers you do or don't like to see for the anything else you'd like to share prompt? Yes, there are things I don't like. Courtney?
That's a great question. I need time to think of some examples. I'm sure that I have them. Maybe just like a reiteration. Like if I've already asked you why you want to go to this school, you give me a good answer, and then you basically copy paste it again below. Probably don't need to do that, but would it be the absolute worst thing? Maybe not.
I don't need you to explain a C, you know, like, oh, I got a C in organic chemistry and oh my God, my life is over or something. I don't need to see anything like that. So I'll just say this from my direct experience. I came out of USC, and Southern California has a football team, and there's a lot of rah-rah crazy people who love Southern California football. And I wish I were lying when I said this, but I am not. I've had a lot of people who talk about their love of football and their love of being a part of the Trojan family and blah, 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 blah. And honestly, that is a straight cue that I roll for me. I appreciate if you want to go to school there, and I also appreciate if you have a legacy and a history there. I do not need to know if you're a football fan. That is going to not even remotely close to sway me. So that's kind of just something that's my personal pet peeve, just from my own direct experience. So that's a big one for me.
Yeah, I agree with the C thing, especially if you give me like some big story about it. This sounds very cold, but if you're like, I had somebody pass away in my family, and so I got a C, and I'm like, so you only got a C in one class?
Thank you.
Seems to have had a very big impact on you. So why is it just in this class? Please don't. Like that doesn't make any sense, or you know, and you know, especially Orgo 2. I think that's the class I've seen the most C's in Orgo 2. It's so common, and so don't need, or feeling like you need to justify something. You don't always need to justify something. Like I stopped doing this thing because the lab closed, and so I don't want them to think. I'm like, well, you can't do 100% of the things 100% of the time. I wouldn't have even noticed that. So if it's helpful, yes. If it adds some personality, sure. But yeah, justifications and stuff like that, make sure they're well-founded and necessary before you start putting them in there, because you can get some eye rolls pretty quickly from that.
Well, and it just diminishes the thought of you, right? I mean, if you say, someone passed away very close to me and I got a C in organic chemistry too, and you're like, only in organic chemistry too? You kind of diminish your authenticity across all the aspects of your application. And that's a bigger hurt than help. I'd rather you leave it blank.
Yeah.
And by the way, if it is optional and you truly have nothing to add, don't add it.
Correct.
It is okay, believe it or not.
Well, and I guess there's some, I know we talked about like character and word count.
Yeah.
There are some where like everything on the form is 5,000 characters. And let's say like the gap year question, and it's 5,000 characters. Do I need all 5,000 characters filled up? No. But if I'm asking, you know, tell me about a time, like a behavioral style question, and I'm giving you 5,000, I'm giving you space to be thorough, but don't fluff just to fluff. Obviously, I'm wanting you to be able to describe and ground and provide perspective and things like that. But there's some questions that just due to the nature of the form, everything has the same character count. It doesn't mean, you have to maximize everything. If it does not make sense, don't try to fill that in with anything weird. It's just a form thing. So pay attention.
If it asks you about a time when, a story about, an experience, I would expect a reflection. So that's where you're going to use your space. Don't shortchange the reflection.
Yep.
If I do not have a significant experience, a significant gap, discrepancy in grades or activities in my application that I feel I need to explain, should I try to answer the questions that ask this, given that they are optional? Nope, you should not. Just say NA.
100%.
What should I do if they are required? You say, I do not have any gaps in my grades, activities. I don't have any discrepancies. You just give a one-line answer. I do not have these. And you move on.
Yep.
For secondaries that ask about COVID, God, I hope that they get rid of those. Secondaries that ask about how COVID played an impact on getting different experiences, but for me, it did not have an impact because I was in high school. How would I go about answering that? I am praying to the secondary gods that the COVID questions go. Right now, I am praying to the secondary gods for that. That being said, Mackenzie, I think you could easily just say, I was very fortunate that I did not have any negative impacts from COVID as it relates to this, or something to that effect.
Yeah, that was a rough time being a director of admission during COVID. I'd like to forget that time period.
I had to learn how to give medical school tests online. I about cried. I did cry, actually, more than a few times. It was very stressful. The one thing I will say, though, about COVID, so I am glad you brought this up, Mackenzie. Please, I am begging you. I seriously, I'm on my knees and begging you. Do not answer a challenge question with a COVID response at this point in time. I respect, I guess, and let me qualify that, unless you truly had an impact, a death, a loss of your home, an actual impact of something significant. If you're going to send me a challenge that tells me that your opportunity to get shadowing was diminished as a freshman in college because of COVID, I am going to send you a nice message back that says, please change your story. I have done it. I've gotten pushback on that a few times, and I'm still going to do it. Please don't do that.
Yeah.
COVID, I think I was on the admissions committee 2 years after COVID, and I think they were all over those answers. Please use caution. Yep. For many of you, you may have had an actual impact from COVID, and that I do not have a problem with because it's not, COVID was the catalyst, but the impact is real. You not getting shadowing or a clinical experience, or you had to go to school online like everybody else in the country, I'm not hearing that one. So, just so you know. My main concern with secondaries is I feel like I'm writing too simplistically, as I just want to answer the question honestly and personally. I like that idea. Would simple writing be okay for secondaries? What I mean by this is not using the wordy and colorful language, and more so telling now instead of showing, not the stories, of course.
Yep.
I like that idea, actually, Roger. I'm here for that. Answer the question.
Right. That's kind of what we're saying, right? Where in the primary, you're like, there I was under the lamplight, pipetting, blah, blah, blah. Like, maybe it works in the primary. That type of sensory stuff, unless the prompt calls for it, is not appropriate in the secondaries. Obviously, you want to have well thought out answers with some depth if it's calling for depth. But yeah, the sensory, colorful, fluff type stuff will feel fluffy here, even though it was appropriately applied for a connection point in the primary, which may seem very weird because it may be the same reader, but the tonal shift is real. You really do need to steer away from that and be a lot more direct.
Yeah. 100% agree. How do you recommend formatting a secondary essay? Should it have a formal introduction and conclusion? You probably don't have enough character space for that. And do you have any recommended formats like seed, watering, etc., similar to the PS? Nope. Well, okay, I'll qualify that a touch. Like I mentioned earlier, when they ask you a why us question, you can certainly say, I hope to become this kind of physician, and this is how your school is going to help me get that. And you can list a couple qualities and then paragraph it out that way in terms of an essay. But a formal introduction and conclusion and a body and a 5-paragraph essay, no, not necessarily. I think it really will depend. The structure will really depend on the question.
Yep.
And remember, 700 characters is about a paragraph. 500 characters is a very short one. 500 characters, 250 characters. USC gives you 65 words.
Yeah. Yep.
65 words. There's no introduction.
Actually, my favorite secondary.
It's much easier to read, that's for sure. USC gives you 65 words. There's nothing there but an answer. And it's a very short and sweet answer to that.
Yeah.
For Charles Drew, they have a secondary asking, how will you use your life experience with poverty and housing insecurity as a physician? And was wondering about how to go that if we personally have not had that experience with poverty and housing insecurity, especially if we've talked about working at a homeless shelter or free clinic in previous essays or activities. Well, I guess I would say it's not for you to tell them what you have done as in terms of working in a homeless shelter or a free clinic. It's how would you incorporate that information as a physician? And you can say, while I may have not had this life experience, I do understand the importance of understanding the lived experience of my patients. I don't know, Courtney, do you have better words for that one?
Yeah, I mean, life experience with it doesn't necessarily mean you have to have grown up with it. Mm-hmm. Sounds like you've been exposed to it through life experience. So right to that, you don't have to have been in the situation, but it sounds like you've been around it if you've worked with people with housing insecurity.
Yeah. But again, it's not necessarily just talking about that you have had that experience. It's how do you,
right.
I have brief experiences working in a homeless shelter or free clinic. Fortunately, I've never had the experiences personally. But as a physician, and this is where you get to the meat, as a physician, this is how I will use it in whatever capacity that is.
Yep.
I think we kind of answered this question. How important is it to reach the full character count on each question? I think you have to thoroughly answer the question with a reflection if it's appropriate. But if you get to it, don't be fluffy on the super long ones. The short ones you're gonna have to cut to fit it into the character count, I bet.
Yep.
Well, I am only applying to 2 top schools I am only applying. Oof, that makes my heart palpate.
Yeah, that's interesting. That's an interesting choice.
To 2 top schools whose missions explicitly center on health equity, identity-informed care, and mentorship. And you have lived these values. Whoa. I feel like something changed. Okay, let me try that again because my screen jumped. I'm like, it's gone.
No, it's written that way.
And you have lived these values. Any tips for writing from a place that isn't overreaching and reaches inward toward the version of myself that deserves the right environment to grow? I don't know how to answer this question.
Let's not write secondaries that way.
Yeah.
That's very hard to track. The 2 top choice, if you want to go nowhere else, you do you. Like, that is a very risky thing. But again, that's your journey. Obviously, it seems like they're your top 2 schools because you identify with what they focus on, what they value, alignment there. So it sounds like you can speak to that alignment personally, potentially professionally, like justifying deserving the right. I don't know if I love that language. deserve is always, and that subjective is always a touchy word for me. But I don't know. Maybe that's not even answering the question.
Yeah, I guess just because their mission's explicitly centered on that and you have those values, you have to, again, your secondaries are going to answer what they ask you. So if they ask you about how you incorporate these values, you would talk about that. If they ask you something completely different, you have to answer that too. So you can't put your values into a question they don't ask, but if they ask, but I don't know that anyone deserves anything in this. I think you pick the best people that are the best fit, and you have to demonstrate that you're a good fit for them in the best possible way. I guess I'll leave that at that. Is it okay to talk about something that happened in high school about 8 years ago, or is that too long ago? I think it depends on the question.
Yep.
I think we're at the last question. How to best balance details versus being too repetitive, especially with activities in the personal statement and secondaries. Again, it always depends on the question. Not everything you put in your primary or secondary is going to go, your primary activities, personal statement or activities is going to go into your secondary. It's not the way they ask the questions. Unless, like, there are some schools that will ask you about your most meaningful clinical activity or your most meaningful service activity. You know what? Then you're going to have to be repetitive. They're asking you the same question.
Yep. Yeah.
So
I was just going to bring that up. Sometimes there are questions that are absolutely repetitive and redundant, because sometimes, like, I'm trying to think of, like, why they would do that. Sometimes they blind interviewers to, like, certain portions of the application or things like that, but there's, like, certain aspects that they want to see. Sometimes they just want, like, a quick view of stuff. They don't want to have to get into it if they're doing a pre-screen. So there's reasons for doing that, but sometimes it is super repetitive.
Yeah.
I like asking for a resume after I just gave you, like, a full-on application, but there's some things that may have been left off, right?
Yep. So yeah, you do your best to answer the question. Ideally, if you're being asked to give a story, try to give a different story, even if you're referencing the same activities. If you've been a medical assistant for 2 years, you should have a few stories to draw from. It's not going to be just the one you put in your activities or the one you talked about in your personal statement. You should have thousands of thoughts to come from that. Yeah. Even if you're talking about the same, like, question, tell me about your most meaningful experience. Don't copy and paste it. Come up with a different story and a slightly different reflection on it. So, what service do you recommend I purchase to get the guidance I need? Casey, it depends on the guidance you need. We have, as Courtney mentioned earlier, we have 30-minute advising sessions. We have 50-minute advising sessions. If you want to chat with somebody, one of us or one of the other advisors, you can certainly purchase one of those advising sessions to get started. And then you can determine, based on the guidance you want, where to go from there. The failure question, or the high school question, can we answer a failure obstacle challenge with a high school experience? I tend to say yes to that one. Because I don't think you're that far removed. You have high school, and sometimes a failure or challenge in high school leaves a big impact. So, yeah, I don't really have a problem with that.
Yeah, I had a really thoughtful answer one time where a girl was talking about how she was so invested in student government and she had been part of it and she ran for president, and some random person came and started running against her and was kind of malicious in the campaigning, didn't seem to want it as much, and she just wanted it so badly, and she didn't get elected. And so, but what was nice about it is, though, she went and had a conversation to ask kind of why he was going about it that way, but she also accepted the loss, and she still leaned in and volunteered to like help in other ways and other capacities when he started initiatives. Like she still leaned in to kind of help take some of the things over or volunteer in some of the community aspects. And I thought that was a very insightful answer. But you know, she lost. She didn't get it, and she was super embarrassed by it. But it was how she responded to it was very mature for her age at that time. So
nice.
Like, that's just one example of like how you could definitely talk through a high school thing that adds some value.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. All right. For this Texas essay question, can you mention a high school experience? Briefly state a unique circumstance or life experience that are relevant to your application, which have not previously been presented. Again, I think it depends. There are some life experiences that are relevant, and there are some that are not. So
I had a Texas, sorry, go ahead.
No, I think there's potential. You go.
Yeah, I had a Texas student write about kind of going through Boy Scouts and getting his Eagle Scout was unapplicable anywhere else. But he was like, it's such a defining part of my childhood, of my teenage years, and some of the things that I was involved in that like, is this appropriate? I was like, yeah, depends on how you frame it. Seems like it was important. It certainly adds a different side. And if you really want them to know this about you, it can be appropriately applied. So yeah, again, just another example of, yeah, sure.
Awesome.
With the right content.
Yeah, anything can potentially be there because things happen. How optional are optional secondaries? With the exception of Texas, most of because I know the optional essay for Texas is not optional. It's not really. But in general, yeah, I think there are some that truly are. That's what I was saying earlier. If you don't have anything to add, you don't need to add it.
Yep.
And some are so narrowly focused that if it truly, going back to someone's question about academic struggles or gaps or whatnot, if you don't have anything to add, what are you going to say that isn't going to be badly reflected on you for just trying to fill in some blanks there? So in general, I would say that most optional questions are truly optional.
Yep.
That includes other impactful experiences on the AMCAS application, all that stuff. Those are actually optional.
Yeah. COVID impact one on the DO application is optional.
Yeah. Please use the option to not do it. So, my own bias, it comes out loud and clear sometimes. All right, my friends. Courtney and I, like I said, we are advisors with MSHQ. So if you have questions, we're happy to set up time and chat with you. Also, I cannot recommend enough having somebody read your secondaries and make sure they see the prompt and the length of the response. Pay attention to the length, whether it's in characters or words, because it's a big difference.
Yeah.
And, ask somebody if you are answering if you ask somebody to read this is not their normal thing, ask them if you are answering the question, right? Yep. It's not about how well you have written it, although that's important. You got to make sure the message is correct. Are you answering the question?
Yeah, so that I would say that and tone, right? Make a big difference. But I mean, again, guys, this is the final piece of the puzzle before you get considered for an interview invite. And that's truly where the triage happens in a cycle, because we're going from 4,000 to 6,000 who actually fill out and return the secondary down to 500-ish that we actually have resources to interview. So post-secondary, that number drops down to 500. Yep. From 4,000 to 6,000. So these are incredibly important. They're incredibly valuable. So start now so that you can have really insightful answers. Change the tone and focus, but these matter a lot. It's a final piece of the puzzle, and then you have to wait to see if you get an interview. There's not much else that you can do for the whole cycle to advocate for yourself other than have a strong interview, which is another topic that you really need to nail and not trip at the finish line. But these matter a lot. Yeah. It's only school-specific stuff.
Yep. And it doesn't matter how dumb you think the question is or how bad you think the question is. They want to know that answer. So we can have all of opinions about it. There's a lot that I don't like, but the reality is we've got to figure out the way to answer the questions they ask.
Yep.
So, all right. Good luck. Hopefully next week you guys are all getting ready to submit and getting on board with all that. So I wish you all the best in this cycle.
Okay. Good luck.
Bye. Let's see. Shut this thing down.